Where do we go? Why do we get it wrong? I think journalists should try to be more courageous. I think they should try to work for editors who are brave enough to print what they write. I have a great good fortune in writing for The Independent, which you can read on various websites, even though you have to pay for it if you go to The Independent's website, another reason why I don't use the internet. Well, it helps my budget and lets me fly further. Nonetheless, I'm very fortunate I have an editor who'll print what I write. Sometimes things go a little bit astray. You take the Toronto Globe and Mail, which popped up not so long ago with an article of mine on the Armenian genocide. But when I referred to the phrase, which I do in The Independent, the Armenian Holocaust, with a capital H, just as we, of course, rightly refer to the Jewish Holocaust with a capital H, the word Holocaust had been deleted, and in its place was tragedy. Like a problem, like a flood, or maybe an earthquake had hit the Armenians, right? So immediately I picked this up. One of my Canadian friends had actually spotted it, called me in Beirut. I called our syndication department and said, ha-ha, when they take our syndicated services, they're not allowed to change the words. So London called Toronto and said, ha-ha, why did you change the words? And it turned out not only had they changed the word, but the editor had left, which apparently then absolved the Toronto Globe and Mail of actually apologizing. And anyway, they hadn't taken the syndication service, they'd just stolen the story anyway. So they had to pay a fine, you know, congratulations. But you'll be surprised how often this happens. Since the Armenians, this is part of an Armenian week, I will say that one of the things I hope will happen, and as a journalist I say this too, is that in the coming months and years, Armenians will try, as Israelis and Jews have tried in Europe, to honor those brave Turks, in the case of the Jews and Israelis, those brave Europeans, who risked their lives to save the people who were stricken, those Turks in this case, who risked their lives to save Armenians. We know who some of them were. Of course, that most of them are dead now. I'm sure all dead. But only the children are still alive, and they're fading away now. But we know names. Even in the British Blue Book, which was published during the First World War, there is honor paid to Turks who risked their lives to save Armenian lives. And I'm struck to say that because I want to read a very small, tiny paragraph of my own book, because I've gone back and tried to interview almost every survivor of the Armenian genocide Holocaust in Lebanon. I went to the Armenian Old People's Home. Down the corridor, a very old man is lying on a bed. He is Harutiun Kebedjian. He is holding in his left hand a Bible in Braille, and his right hand is fingering the embossed paper letters. He greets me with a smile, sightlessly. It is now the year 2000. And he is 93 years old. So he was 8 when he survived the Armenian Holocaust. His memory is as clear as his emotions. He said, "We lived in Dortyol. My father was called Sakis and my mother was Mariam. There were 10 children, including me and my brothers and sisters. The Turks collected all the people with their donkeys and horses. We were to go to Aleppo and Ras Al Ain, but they started killing us on the way. The Turks forced us to the Habur River, and by the time we got there, there was only my mother and my sister and me left. They told the women and the men to take off all their clothes. My sister was 18, and a man on a horse came and grabbed her and put her on his horse. He did this in front of us. It happened in front of my eyes. I was not blind then. And they started to beat my mother. As she begged them not to take my sister, the Turks beat her to death. I have always remembered that as my mother died, she screamed my name, Harutiun, Harutiun. Later, an Arab Bedouin took me to his house, and I stayed there for 3 years. The war was over, and then people came saying they were looking for Armenian orphans. I said I was Armenian, so they took me to Aleppo. There I caught a virus that affected my eyes. I was suddenly blind, and I was only 11 years old. Until I was 23, I was filled with rage because the Turks took my sister and beat my mother in front of my eyes until she died. But when I was 23, I felt this was not the right way to be a man. So I began to pray to God so he would see me. I was making peace with myself. Now I'm ready to meet my God. I am at peace. Last year, when the big earthquake happened in Turkey, it killed so many Turks. And I prayed to God for those Turks. I prayed for those poor Turkish people. What a guy. I have to tell you that when I went to cover that earthquake, I found wandering in the earthquake zone of Istanbul a very bright, middle-aged Turkish man with his daughter, spoke beautiful English. And I said, well, what do you do? What are you doing? He said, well, actually, I'm the top earthquake specialist in Turkey, and they won't even pay my taxi fares to go and see what's happened in my country, the government. So I said, from this moment, you are working for the Independent. So I took this guy around all the earthquake zones. It was an appalling horror. I mean, 40,000, I think, was probably the figure of Turks who died in that earthquake, because, of course, their buildings have been built without proper anti-earthquake protection. And when afterwards he and his family and family friends gathered beside the Bosphorus, I remember I said to them, OK, well, here comes the big question, Armenian genocide. And they all said, yes, of course it happened. Our people were responsible, and we should say so. Well, we'll find out, because in October, the Turkish edition of my book, complete with the Armenian genocide chapter, which is called The First Holocaust, is being published in Turkish. An Armenian who speaks Turkish in Beirut has checked over the translation, and it's perfect. And I will be lecturing on the Armenian genocide across Turkey. So, as they say in journalism, watch this space. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll finish by just saying two brief remarks. Firstly, I will not let 19 murderers change my world, and nor should you.
Robert will now take questions from the audience. Just to remind you, Robert will be signing books over here, The Great War for Civilization, as well as Pity the Nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry again about the bits of film. They would have been worth watching. If you have any questions for Uncle Noam, as I always refer to him, but not usually in his presence, please shoot them at him as well. There's always a wonderful moment when no one puts their hand up, but it's already happened. I think there's a mic that's going to run around. There it is, and there's the first person there.
Hello. I thought your talk was wonderful. Could you, based on your experience in Iraq, answer two questions? One is the actual level of what is the actual level of control that U.S. forces have over Iraq relative to the insurgents? And secondly, what are can you elaborate on the specific ways in which civil war is being fomented and exaggerated by U.S. forces and their interests?
Syria and Iran from any possibility of a ground invasion. Bombing, that's something else. One more. The gentleman over there, and then I'm going to
Thank you.
Work out which country I'm in.
My respect to both of you for your courage, doctors, and also for your conscientiousness. My question to Dr. Fisk is, how do you feel about being a foreign journalist being invited to Turkey to speak while other journalists in Turkey are being persecuted?
I have spoken in Turkey before, and I have talked about the Armenian genocide at some length during a lecture in Istanbul, which was actually supported by Sabancı University, the private university in Istanbul. And after I finished speaking, one of the members of the audience, who said he was a retired general in the Turkish army, said I was absolutely correct in what I said about the Armenian genocide. I think the page is turning in Turkey. I think it's a great honor to be invited to speak in Turkey, and I look forward to it very much.